Ladies all around the world, listen up. We're looking for you. The time has come to be unstoppable together. The danger of executive women is worrying we're not enough, obsessed with perfection, failing to perform. You're in the right place. It's now time to be unstoppable together with Connie Pheiff. She was the director of the United States Chamber of Commerce and CEO of the Girl Scouts. Sit down, squat down, or lie down. It's time for Up or Out, all business with Connie Pheiff, your unstoppable diva and chair of the Pheiff Group, helping women in leadership achieve excellence and be unstoppable together.
But hey, it's Connie Pheiff, and you're here with Up or Out with Connie and Jeff. So this is Jeff Pheiff, and he is now a co-host of the show. And you've already seen him around a couple of times, but we're back here again today, and we're interviewing Evan Hackel. Now, Evan, he's so awesome. I've asked him to come back again because he is a returning guest on the show. But Evan Hackel, he is the CEO of both Engage Consulting, which is a leading management consulting firm, which is focused on franchising relationships, and Turtle Training, which is a leading training company in, what else? Franchising. Evan has started 3 different franchise businesses himself. He has bought a bankrupt franchise system with $700 million in sales, and within 4 years, he was able to turn that around into a $2 billion business. Now, Evan has also been a franchisee, and between all of his 35 years in franchising, he started, worked with, and has been involved with over 75 different franchise businesses. So he knows it all. He knows the pros and cons. He's here to help you understand what to look for when you're buying a franchise and what to avoid. So, Evan, welcome to the show.
Terrific to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So let's just jump right into franchising. And we were talking, and franchising seems to be really, an interesting way for people to start a business because there's so many entrepreneurs now. And a couple of years ago, they were saying by 2018, 60% of people were going to be entrepreneurs. I don't think we're at that number right now, but they are definitely looking at that number to continue to increase. And most entrepreneurs, where do they go? They start looking at franchises. So what's the pros and cons of that?
Well, obviously someone in the industry, I love franchising. Having said that, and I think franchising is an incredible business model, about 80% of all franchising businesses out there are to be avoided. And there are just a lot of bad players, a lot of bad systems. And so, a lot of people ask me, well, is franchising a great business model or is it a bad business model?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer to that is yes. It can be a great business model and it can be a bad business model. And what I mean by that is that when it's done right, and when the franchisor and the franchisee are aligned, they're not fighting, they're working together. When the franchisor is providing the right kind of support, the franchisee is getting tremendous value. They're getting the power of the brand. They're getting massive advertising, much more than they could do on their own. They're getting training systems. They're getting operation systems, all well worth paying any of the royalties and advertising fees that they have. They're getting more for what they're paying than they would get if they were in business by themselves. The problem with franchising is that a lot of franchisors are not good at working with their franchisees.
The franchisor themselves. The head cheese. The
franchise, yeah. And there are some people, by the way, that are not good franchisees. I should put that on the table too, because if you decide to be a franchisee, you're saying to yourself, I am willing to support a franchisor's decision even when sometimes I don't agree. And the reason
is support always there?
Not always there, no. That's part of the problem with franchising.
Oh, okay.
And some franchise systems don't do a great job of vetting franchisees, which we can talk more about later. And what happens is think about the boat where everyone's rowing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Boat goes really fast when everyone's rowing in the same direction. When people are all rowing in different directions, the boat goes in circles. And that's the same thing that happens in franchising.
Okay.
So you can sit back as a business person and you will not agree with everything a franchisor does. You won't.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, if you don't support those initiatives, then the whole system's going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. Everyone's going to get hurt because it's that boat going in a circle because everyone's rowing in different directions.
Mm.
So when you join a franchise system, you want to make sure that you fundamentally agree with their mission, their vision, their culture, what they're doing. Because if you don't support the franchisor fully, the system gets hurt. And when the system gets hurt, it hurts everybody. And that's the difference between great franchise systems where franchisees are making a lot of money and franchisors are doing well, and franchise systems where there's slow growth, a lot of franchisees are leaving because they can't get their support. And what happens is, and this is very interesting, when you think about great businesses, one of the things great businesses are able to do is they're able to change. They're able to adapt to the world as things happen. When a franchise system is dysfunctional and the franchisees are not listening and not supportive, then the franchisor starts to move to mediocrity. Well, we can't get our franchisees to do this little thing. How could we get them to do this big thing?
Right.
And that puts everyone's business in jeopardy.
Well, let me just stop you there for a minute. With franchises, what is the percentage of franchises that do become successful?
Okay, so that's a very arbitrary thing.
Okay.
So what I say to people, and this is my personal opinion, is about 80% of franchise systems out there I would not personally invest in.
Wow, that's a high number.
Yeah, and that's a very high number. Having said that, the predominance of the ones that I would invest in are the bigger players, the more seasoned players. So maybe the percentage of franchises is not, when you look at the total, I'm talking about systems. And maybe let me take a few seconds here and give you some key things that people need to look for in that franchise system. Okay. The number one statistic that I can determine to determine whether or not you're in a healthy franchise system is one that no one else ever looks at. And that is what percentage of the franchisees actually attend their national convention. So there are franchise systems that will be in the 15, 20% range.
Right.
But the good systems are in the 80% or plus. And the reason why this statistic, and if you're looking to buy a franchise, you want to ask this question, is so important, is because it's a definition of engagement. Okay. If they care about the system, they're going to take time to come to the national meeting. If they're disengaged, upset, frustrated, don't care that much, then they're not going to spend the money and they're not going to go. So that one statistic will tell you a tremendous amount about the system, because to make changes and to make adjustments, they need to have people engaged. They need to, once engage with an eye is involvement. So the franchisor needs to involve their franchisees, listen to them, because they're doing it every day, and their thoughts and input can make the system better.
Right.
Similarly, the franchisee has to be engaged. They have to be listening to the franchisor, paying attention to the message, and take responsibility for doing their part. And the biggest part of doing their part is going to the national meeting. So I had a client who came to me, big national brand. I'm not going to mention the brand; it'll be obvious shortly. Okay. And they felt that they needed to revamp the look of their businesses. It's in the food service businesses, and that they were outdated, and they wanted to change the look of the business.
What is that, pizza place?
I'm not going to say what. I'm not going to give any clues. They only had 20% of their franchisees coming to the meeting. So they came to me to help them get more. They wanted to improve their attendance because their franchise requirement, it was optional for people to do this upgrade.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, if it was mandated or if it was something that people had a choice to do. So of course they wanted more people to do it, so they keep with the brand of the franchise.
Yeah. And most franchise systems, there's a revolving period of time of mandatority,
Okay,
okay? Because not everyone's coming at the same time.
right.
So unless you inspire, it's hard to get everyone to do everything at once.
Hmm.
So they came to me to improve attendance. So I called and talked to franchisees, and I hear the same thing I hear from everyone: not making as much money as I'd like. It's expensive to go. They'll tell me everything I miss, so I don't really need to go. And I hear these things very commonly.
Okay.
By the way, I can tell you system after system after system, choreographically. There's a word, I'm not saying it right. Definitively,
Okay.
that the profitability of those people that attend conferences as a franchisee versus those don't are 2 and 3 times higher than those that don't. I've done the math because that's part of what I do when I talk to my clients is, okay, let's look at the group that go, let's look at the group that don't go. Who are growing the faster? It's always those that are going. Who have the most profitability? It's always those that go because
They're more engaged in the process.
they're more engaged
You
in the
know,
process.
they're buying in. So the ones that aren't going, they're the ones that are like, oh, I could do it myself. I don't agree with what they're doing. So I mean, it's very clear that's where the breakdown is. I mean, in any business, I mean, if you don't have that clear, I mean, people could agree to disagree. I
Sure.
mean, you have to have that. And then if there's not, then that's, that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, so
let me finish the story because I think
okay.
this makes an important point. So they had already designed their new restaurant design.
Mm-hmm.
Had it done. Loved it.
Okay.
I said, how much input did you get from your franchisees? None. Zero. And I said to them, when I looked at their meetings, I said, you do these meetings, all you're doing is talking at them.
Yes.
I said, so what if we change this meeting? And instead of you selling them this one design, what if you build 3 different designs and ask them to critique it and give you recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
And what if the call of action to come to the meeting wasn't come to the meeting because it's a normal meeting, but come to the meeting because we're designing the new prototype for the future and we want your input.
Yeah.
And they ended up with 85% attendance. They could have had more, but the hotel they were in and the 2 nearby sold out.
Okay.
And what ended up happening is they ended up with the design that was totally different than the design they had picked.
Okay.
And they had realized that the input actually made a better design.
Mm-hmm.
And they had more people sign up to be prototypes than they thought were going to buy in the first place.
Got it.
All because of engagement.
Right.
And that simple change. So part of the issue in franchising is this issue of engagement. I want to talk about the other thing that people need to look at. So the first thing I talked about is utilize that statistic of what percentage of the franchisees attend. That to me is very critical. Obviously, if you're looking to buy a franchise, if you're a franchisor, you should be paying attention to what percentage attend. And if they're not coming, you should be nervous.
So
Okay.
for you, so for you and what you do, so if somebody was considering buying a franchise, that information, those statistics, is that public information? Is that something that you talk to the potential future franchisee and say, let's take a look at which franchise you're looking at and see where their involvement is and see how the franchisees are both interacting and see where, that engagement is going on back and forth. So is that something that you provide to them in terms of evaluating different franchisers?
Okay. What I do in my consulting businesses, I help franchisors create better relationships with their franchisees through engagement.
Okay.
I help them get more people to come to their conferences. I help them make their conferences more interactive. Okay. I help them with all of their communication within the system. I help them create two-way flows. I help them with regional networking groups. I help them do planning and strategic planning by involving their franchisees. That's what I do. I
Okay.
don't.
Yeah, I
I
wanted
don't.
to get very clear on that so our listeners weren't confused.
Yeah, no, I'm giving advice for someone buying because I know you have listeners that would consider buying
Mhm.
franchises. And
Absolutely.
and I encourage people to buy franchises. I just encourage people to buy the 20% that are really good. And
So what's the second part? You said there was something else they should be on the lookout for.
that's the size of the franchise system. So
Okay.
I have a saying in business that says
Mhm.
that there's a point in many businesses where you're too big to be small and too small to be big.
Mm. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when a person decides to franchise their business and they're super small, they're
Mhm.
5, 10, 15 units, they can be pretty successful. Everyone knows everyone. It's not that hard to operate. They're selling franchises. They're making a little money.
Right.
But that next level, when they move from there to trying to get to 50 to 100, is a very difficult point for them.
Okay.
First off, most small franchisors are dependent on the franchise fee to make a profit,
Right.
meaning they have to sell franchises or they
Right.
won't make money. There's not enough money from royalties coming in to be standalone profitable.
Right.
So that franchisor is focusing on selling franchises more than they are running the franchise business because they have to sell franchises to make payroll.
Got it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what I say to somebody looking at these smaller systems, and a smaller system, by the way, can be fantastic if it's the right people, is it well funded? And when you're looking at the franchise discovery document, which is a public document that every franchisor is required by law to share with prospective,
Right.
you want to look at the financial statement and you want to know, is it a positive statement, meaning they got a positive net worth? You'd be amazed how many don't. They have
Okay.
negative net worth. And then you want to look and see, are they able to make money if they weren't selling franchises? Now, if they have enough equity in the company,
Mhm.
money in the company, and they're not making money without selling franchises, that's okay because they know enough to have enough capital that they're going to be in business for the long run. But
Okay.
if they have negative net worth and they can't make money selling franchises, that's a major red flag. Now, that doesn't mean the system can't be successful, but you've got to really evaluate the people that you're going into business with. And do you
Mhm.
really think they have the acumen and they have the ability to really run a system? And there's a huge change once you go from small to mid-size,
Right.
where you now need people that their job is franchise support.
Data resources. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's painful because if they're not making money or they're dependent on sales to hire those people to
Right.
get to that next point. So typically speaking, if you're in a system with over 100 franchises, they pass that pain point.
Okay.
So size does matter in terms
Mhm.
of security, of safety of your investment. That doesn't mean that they're great franchisors. The statistic of attendance is much more important than the statistic of size.
Right.
If they're smaller, a different kind of person generally would buy them. They're perhaps more entrepreneurial. They can have more
Uh-huh.
input in the system.
They're not true business people is probably what you're looking at. We had looked at a franchise after Girl Scouts. We were looking at UPS. We had all the information, several conversations, and he's the one that reviewed all of the financials. And then, I don't know, we decided not to.
We didn't. But you're bringing up some very good points, Evan. What else do you think from I'm going to buy a franchise perspective, should I be looking out for? Besides, I hear you, hey, the national events is a very good indicator. Also, the size, but it always depends on the people within the organization, so to speak, to create that engagement. Whether you're small or big, it really depends on that team. From hey, I'm not as big a franchisor in terms of my size.
Mm.
And so I guess my question, so what else would you look at as from a watch out perspective?
Okay, so I would want to look for consistency. I would want to look at the locations and see, do the locations look alike? Are there real brand standards? And, I have a question, and it's kind of a trick question to ask the franchisor, which is, I know you have all these rules. How much flexibility do you have? And if the franchisor says, you know what, we're pretty flexible, we're not that rigid, we don't inspect you, run. Because you're building a brand. The brand is about consistency. How can you build a brand if everybody is different?
Doing their own thing, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it's one thing, and I always encourage this with a franchisor. If somebody comes to you with an idea, you want to listen, and it's okay to have a few brands prototype an idea, but that's done with the blessing of the brand. It's being measured. So what I would encourage people to do is go visit some locations and look for consistency. And you obviously want to talk to and get validation who people who are franchisees. And when you talk to them, ask them these questions. Does the franchisor, listen to you? What if you want to do things differently? And, that's the interesting one is some, oh yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
That's a bad sign. There are franchise tools out there. There's a company called Franchise Business Review. And then there are a couple others out there that are Fran Survey and et cetera. And these are good tools to look at to see what the franchise system is saying in its entirety, if the franchisor will share with you those results. But nothing is better than talking to the franchisees that are there. Right. And then the last thing I would say is you have to build a budget. And a franchisor is going to give you, there's a thing called an Item 19, which is a financial disclosure. If they don't have one, because some people will say, based on our attorney's advice, we're not providing any data here. About 60% do. If they don't provide any data, I can assure you their system isn't making a lot of money.
Well,
okay.
Evan, let me jump into a couple of questions before we run out of time here. This is all critical information, especially for entrepreneurs, people just coming out or coming out of corporate and deciding, hey, I want to start a business. But for you as an individual, I have a couple questions. So I want to finish the sentence. I am a leader because
I care.
Okay. What do you got?
Well, it's empathy or caring about your team or who you're working with is absolutely critical in building that engagement. So right on.
So my favorite success quote is?
My favorite success quote is, I hope my biggest failure is yet to come because otherwise I am no longer trying.
Love that. Love that. How about my process for evaluating opportunities?
People first, business opportunity second, market receptivity or market interest third.
Okay.
Financial ability, meaning is there enough money to give the business the time it needs to succeed? Because being underfunded is one of the number one failures of business.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
I'm sure I do. We have time.
We have a couple more minutes.
In terms of, turning the fence around from being a franchisee to a franchisor, there are things from a franchisor perspective that when you look across the multiple franchisors that you've worked with, key differences that you might see between them?
There are franchisors that are very focused on their success as a franchisor, And then there are franchisors that recognize the key to success is their franchisees, and that if they make their franchisees successful, they will be successful. And it's an attitude, and you can tell pretty easily when talking to people which way people are thinking. And a lot of franchisors don't even know how profitable their franchisees are, which is a telltale sign that they don't care. Because remember, a franchisor gets a royalty check, whether the franchisee is making money or not. And they can do things to improve volume that don't necessarily improve profitability. And if they're not really hyper-focused on the franchisee's profitability, they're not going to, in the long run, be successful.
Okay. And, I've always believed from a management perspective, you have measurements. I know you talked about franchise tools, but what sort of measures typically are in the franchise agreements or data that the franchisor is looking to get from their franchisee besides that check every month?
Well, a good franchisor is generally going to have somebody take a personality profile test that's going to help them understand if they match the top quartile of their franchisees in terms of the right personality. It's tough for certain people to be good franchisees. You've got to be a team player. And if you're more of an individual player, then you're not going to succeed as a franchisee. And the franchisor needs to find that out. A good franchisor is, it's interesting. They really can't help the franchisee build a budget because they're making a representation. But they can see or know if the franchisee did build a budget. And that will tell you a lot. They need to also make sure that they properly represent the amount of capital that's necessary. Sometimes they try to make it look smaller than it really is, and then the person buys based on that, and then they don't have the capital to really run that business. And not all businesses, in fact, most businesses don't start off profitable day one. It takes them 6 months to a year or more. Right. And they need to factor that in. So you have to have not be able to just write the check. They have to have enough money to get to profitability. I like to call it the days to first dollar of profit. And then they have to have the right personality to be a team player. Being a team player doesn't mean you have no ideas. It just means you know how to properly share them in a positive way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So any other questions? You good?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Well, Evan, the final question, I have for the hot seat is, when will you ever be satisfied?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
Stumped you, huh?
Yeah, you stunned me. That's a good hot seat question. I'm going to answer this oddly.
Okay.
I'm already satisfied.
Okay.
And I believe that there are people that say, when I get to this financial security, when I get to this, when this is, I can finally be happy.
Right.
And I believe in enjoying the journey. And I'm very impassioned by what I do because I help small businesses be successful. Mm-hmm. And I love doing that. And I love the impact that I have on people. And I enjoy that every day. So I'm already happy, already satisfied.
Oh, I mean, I love that. I mean, you could definitely tell that it is. So what is your truth, that North Star that keeps you going?
That other people have great ideas. Mm-hmm. And that when I listen and talk to other people, I'm listening for why they're right and not why they're wrong. And that I believe I'm a smart, intelligent human being, but I believe there are other smart, intelligent human beings. In fact, I believe there are people that are maybe not that as smart as I am that have great ideas. So my truth is always listening for other ideas from other people and not listening defensively, but listening for why they're right. And I will tell everyone who's listening, and I talk a lot about this, by the way, in my book, if you start listening for the kernel of truth, it will change your life forever.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, Evan, you are in the business of helping people buy the right franchise and avoid getting burned.
That's actually not true.
That's not true.
I'm in the business of helping franchisors run a great franchise that people will want to buy. I'm an advocate and care about this topic because there are so many franchises that are not worth buying. And I'm passionate about helping people avoid that. Okay. But I don't, if someone's listening today and thinking about buying a franchise, right, I'm not really the person to call. If someone's a franchisor that wants to be a better franchisor, I'm the right guy to call.
You're the right guy. You're the right guy to call here. And you're also regularly featured in the media, and you're a regular columnist, the Ask Evan columnist for Franchising USA magazine.
That is true.
That's pretty awesome.
I actually really love the questions. I think it's great to do that, and I do write a lot. I have a passion about giving back, and so my wife asked me, what was my goal of this podcast? Yeah. And I said, well, really, my goal of this podcast isn't anything to do with my business. My goal of this podcast is to make people aware of the key things to look at if they're looking at buying franchising. I am an advocate of franchising, like I said at the beginning. Right. And I encourage people to buy them because if you buy a great franchise, it can be a great business for people.
Yeah, definitely.
But you got to be careful.
Yeah. Outstanding. So where can our listeners find you, Evan?
My website is Engage, spelled with an I for involvement. So it's ingage.net. And if they go there, I have a free gift. I have a book called Engaging Leadership. If they click on the Learn More under the book, I actually have a leader's guide. And what's kind of cool about my leader's guide is you don't need my book to use it. So it gives 7 different exercises to use within your company to get greater engagement in any kind of company. It doesn't have to be a franchise company. So people go to engage.net, spelled with an I, and they click on Learn More under my book, they can get my leader's guide, and it's a pretty cool leader's guide and has some pretty, you asked me some provocative questions. That basically it provides them with provocative questions to ask their company and their teammates, whether they're small or big. It's a great guide, and it's a free gift if people would like to do that.
Cool. Well, that's all we have for today.
It's been fun.
Thank you.
I like the new partnership.
You like the new partnership?
Yeah.
we need to get a better mic.
Yes.
Well, thanks for being here. I'm thrilled that you're back here, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you around the C-suite.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I always like to.
And Jeff as well. He's now a new advisor too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So
and you're interviewing my wife in not too long, and that's kind of cool.
I know. It's a family affair. So we'll see you. We'll see you real soon. Thanks for being here.
It's great.
Bye.
Ladies all around the world, listen up. We're looking for you. The time has come to be unstoppable together. The danger of executive women is worrying we're not enough, obsessed with perfection, failing to perform. You're in the right place. It's now time to be unstoppable together with Connie Pheiff. She was the director of the United States Chamber of Commerce and CEO of the Girl Scouts. Sit down, squat down, or lie down. It's time for Up or Out, all business with Connie Pheiff, your unstoppable diva and chair of the Pheiff Group, helping women in leadership achieve excellence and be unstoppable together.